Leadership research used to focus mostly on traits and behaviors, trying to find a one-size-fits-all formula. But scholars eventually realized that leadership effectiveness depended heavily on context, the setting, the environment, the people involved. This presentation summarizes the arguments in Barack Ossi's 2018 paper published in the Leadership Quarterly. OC is an associate professor of organizational behavior and human resources at Singapore Management University, and he reviewed tons of studies to make sense of how context influences leadership. While early leadership research focused on universal traits and behaviors, Fiedler and others in 1978 shifted focus to contingency theories, which emphasized the need to match leadership style to situational demands. And the argument with contingency theories is that leadership doesn't happen in a vacuum, it happens in a context. This article by Barack Osi reviews how contextual factors shape leadership processes and outcomes. John's 2006 framework is used to categorize context and explain how both broad and specific situations influence leadership. Context affects every part of leadership, including who emerges, what works, and how it's judged. OC reviews Johns' 2006 categorical framework for context, and this framework is splitting context into two levels: the omnibus context, which is the big picture, things like national culture, time period, group composition, and then the discrete context, which refers to more immediate conditions like the task at hand, the team dynamics, the physical distance, or the time pressure. And these help us pinpoint how and where context interacts with leadership behaviors. These contextual factors can influence behavior directly or moderate the relationships between the variables. With those broad environmental influences of the omnibus context, they answer questions like who, what, when, where, and why, where being things like institutional forces or organizational type, who being group dynamics, sex or gender composition of the group, and when being what economic cycles or crises are occurring, what changes the organization facing. With our discrete context, those again are specific things: tasks, social, physical, or temporal factors that might influence the leader in the group. Task factors include complexity of the task, autonomy that the members have over the task, the clarity of the task. Social factors could be the team's culture, the cohesion among the group members, and the power distance from the leaders to the followers. The physical distance and layout and proximity to the leader, so where physically people are in relation to each other. And then temporal factors are things like time pressure, urgency, and facing. Because we would expect these discrete situation-specific variables to have stronger interaction with the leaders, but that isn't always the case. For instance, with the omnibus context, those crises that our organization might be facing, like a natural disaster, those probably have the largest influence over the leadership at the time. Let's focus on the omnibus context a bit more. Where leadership happens affects the cultural expectations of leaders. For instance, what's praised in one country might be disliked in another. Leadership then is shaped by the national culture, the institutions, and the organizational type. For example, in collectivistic cultures, relationships may matter more than individual performance. Institutional norms also affect leadership emergence. Who is being led, including the group gender makeup or age, also matters for how leaders are perceived. The sex composition and demographic differences affect how leaders emerge and are evaluated by others. For instance, female leaders are more positively evaluated in gender-balanced groups than male-dominated, and group characteristics can moderate the leadership outcomes. When refers to timing, leaders act differently during crises or economic downturns, and followers expect different things. Time-sensitive factors can shape leadership reactions and follower responses. For instance, charisma is more valued in times of crisis, and leaders adapt communication and behavior when they're under economic pressure. For our discrete context, we'll ask questions about the task. For instance, how ambiguous or unambiguous is the task? A highly ambiguous task would require one kind of leader, where an unambiguous task might benefit from another kind of leader. The complexity of the task, the interdependence of different tasks, and the autonomy we have over the task influence what leadership behaviors are effective, and the characteristics of our job or of doing the task can either buffer our stress or enhance our stress, or can increase the effectiveness of a leader or decrease the effectiveness of a leader. An example is that shared leadership works best when tasks are highly complex. For our social factors, we will ask questions like, is the team close-knit or are they highly conflict-ridden? That would change what kind of leader is effective. The climate of the team and the culture of the organization can influence the leader's impact. Strong innovation climates, for instance, can enhance the effect of transformational leadership. And also, the social network position of a person can influence whether or not they emerge as a leader and how much influence they have over the group. Leaders and followers also behave differently when they're physically distant versus physically close, like in a remote work versus in the office setting. Physical distance can weaken leadership effect, and remote leadership challenges traditional relationship building activities. Leaders and followers also can behave differently when they're under really tight deadlines or when they have quite a lot of time to complete a project. Most research on temporal factors focuses on time pressure, which can impair our creativity and problem solving. Too much or too little time pressure reduces performance. So ideally, we have a moderate amount of pressure when there's a leadership circumstance. Helping teams manage their pacing can reduce conflict and improve outcomes. Some scholars argue that traits like intelligence and dominance consistently predict leadership regardless of the context, while others say that situational factors are essential and neglecting them can lead to overgeneralization. Recently, there was a meta-analysis conducted on trait and context. A meta-analysis looks at two variables here, trait and context, and how they predict leadership. It looks at that relationship across a variety of different studies to figure out what the overall effect is, and the meta-analysis revealed that both trait and context do matter to leadership. And the effects of context can be huge. It can act as a filter. It doesn't just influence leadership, it sets boundaries on what's possible for a leader. It can even invert expected outcomes to make the opposite of what we'd expect to happen because those contextual factors matter so much. A style that works in one setting could totally backfire in another. And for researchers, this means that findings aren't always transferable across industries or cultures. And context can help us avoid false assumptions about what good leadership looks like because it can change depending on these various discrete and omnibus context factors. When we're looking at a leader, we do want to look at their traits and their behaviors, but we also want to consider what those other contextual factors are. Who, what, when, where, why is all relevant, as are our task, social, physical, and temporal factors.